You know, when you think of Bigfoot, you probably picture the same thing we all do, right? This huge, hairy, ape-man creature, you see it for a second in the woods and then it's gone. But what if that's just the tip of the iceberg? What if the actual stories, the first-hand accounts, point to something way, way stranger? Let's get into it.
So many of these stories start exactly like this. Picture it, a mom and her daughter, they're driving down some dark, snowy road. And boom, there it is, a giant figure standing on the side of the road. It's that classic image, right? The one we all know. It's the perfect starting point. But see, that's the thing. The stories don't stop there. They start with that classic glimpse, but they go somewhere else entirely. We're talking about behavior that's, well, it's intelligent, it's interactive, and honestly, it's pretty unsettling. And that's what we're really digging into here.
All right, first up, the classic sighting. But as you can see, there's more than meets the eye. We're going to start with what seems like a totally typical encounter, but you'll see pretty quick that even these stories, they've got some weird details that just don't fit the shy forest ape theory.
I mean, look at these scenarios. They're like something out of a horror movie, but people report them all the time. You got the creature crossing the road, a giant figure just watching your campsite, or catching those yellow eyes in your headlights. Yikes. And then there's being chased through the woods, or seeing one just standing there, silent, across a river. These are the building blocks of the legend, those heart-pounding moments.
Okay, so this is where things take a turn. Let's circle back to that mother and daughter on the snowy road, because their story is the perfect example. It wasn't just a one-and-done sighting. What happened next makes you think this was no accident.
So check this out. Night one, they see this silver-haired Bigfoot, and they try to explain it away. You know, our minds are playing tricks on us. But then the very next night, it's back, in the exact same spot. The mother said it felt like it was waiting for them. And this time, it walks right into the middle of the road, stops, and just stares at them. Lets them get a really good look. I mean, what do you make of that? It's almost like it knew they were second-guessing themselves and came back to say, nope, I'm real. Look at me.
Okay, now we're going to ramp things up a bit. We're moving from just seeing these things to, well, to them interacting with us. We're talking about direct, smart, and, frankly, super weird interactions. This is where that line between animal and something else gets really, really blurry.
You can just hear the disbelief in that quote, right? Oh crap, that's a Bigfoot. So this comes from a woman named Tammy. She and her husband thought they just had a pesky bear getting into their dumpster. But then they saw what it was actually doing and realized, nope, not a bear, not even close.
So just follow the logic here. A bear would just rip this thing to shreds, right? But this creature, it opens the locked lids, it pulls out a few bags like it's looking for something specific. Then, and this is the craziest part, when it gets spotted, it doesn't just bolt. It puts the trash bags back inside, closes the lids, and then resecures the locks. I mean, that's a process. That's problem solving. It's almost polite.
And after all that careful work, you'd think it was after food, right? Wrong. The only thing missing from that dumpster was a child's broken rocking horse. A toy. Just let that sink in. Why would it take that? Was it a curiosity? A gift for one of its own? We have no idea. But that is definitely not normal animal behavior.
And it's not just the dumpster story. These reports are filled with bizarre interactions. You've got things like leaving a marble with a hair inside it. Is that a gift? Then there's a story about small sticks being tossed near a boy, and then hearing what sounded like kids giggling in the woods. You have clear warnings, like a huge rock thrown between two loggers. And then you get into the really high strangeness stuff, like a piece of tree bark just materializing in front of someone, or faking the sound of a bulldozer crash. It's all over the map.
All right, so this all leads us to a really wild idea. A pretty radical hypothesis, actually. If these things are that smart, that aware, what if some of them are so human-like they could actually be living among us?
Okay, get this story. It apparently came from just a random chat in a grocery store parking lot. The person telling the story met this guy who, coincidentally, owned a business with Bigfoot in the name. And this business owner starts telling him about this guy he used to work with, a guy who was, let's just say, memorable.
Let's just look at the stats on this guy. He's almost 8 feet tall, built like a tank. He's from Alamosa, Colorado, a place famous for Bigfoot sightings. He's got way more body hair than average, has to get his clothes and shoes custom made. And then there's the strength. The story goes he once lifted a 5-ton log by himself.
I mean, come on. At what point does coincidence just not cut it anymore?
So a story like that feeds into this really fascinating idea. Maybe we're not talking about just one thing when we say Bigfoot. Maybe it's a whole spectrum. On one end, you've got the classic beast, the big hairy monster from the woods. But on the other end, you have this humanoid type, something with less hair, more human-like features, something that could maybe, just maybe, blend in.
And this is backed up by what people say they see. It really does cover a whole range. Some witnesses swear the face was totally ape-like, like a gorilla. Others say it looked more primitive, kind of like a Neanderthal. But then you get the reports that are really chilling. The ones that say the face was almost indistinguishable from the human. This one idea could explain why we get so many different kinds of stories.
Okay, so let's wrap this up and try to make sense of it all. We started with a classic monster in the snow, right? And we've ended up with stories about creatures that solve problems, show curiosity, and maybe even walk among us.
So really, the big takeaway is this. If you listen to what the witnesses are actually saying, this isn't just about finding a new kind of ape. It's way deeper than that. The behaviors they describe, things like logic, curiosity, communication, maybe even kindness, it just completely shatters our neat little categories of human and animal.
And that leaves us with the biggest question of all. Forget, is Bigfoot real for a second? The real question these stories force us to ask is, what is Bigfoot? Because if there's a creature out there that's this smart, this self-aware, and this close to being human, then the scariest thought isn't that we'll find one in the forest someday. It's that they might have found their way into our world already.